Assalamualaikum and good day. Today we will present about nominated subcontractor. The presentation is being prepared by Intan Nur Fairuz, Khairul Nisa, Nurul Afika, Nur Shahida and me Nur Najiha. The nominated subcontractor is the one that has been selected by the client to carry out a part of the work. After the main contractor is appointed, nominated subcontractors are imposed on the main contractor.
Next, in clause 47.1, domestic subcontractor. Domestic subcontractor is individual hired by the contractor to carry out the works or services. The contractor may sublet the works to other people with the written consent of the SO. Written permission is required since the work will be done by other people. To the contractor's benefit, SO's consent cannot be withheld unfairly. It should be granted quickly unless the SO has reasonable grounds to refuse, such as lack of expertise. The contractor is responsible for the work performed by the subcontractors.
Next is domestic subcontractor under the clause 47.5 on PWD. The clause stated that if the contractor subcontracts the work to his subcontractors without first obtaining approval from the superintending officer, the SO has the ability to instruct the contractor to terminate the subcontract or terminate the main contract based on clause 51.1 at PWD. The clause stated is if the contractor fails to follow any terms of condition of the contracts.
Hi, Assalamualaikum. My name is Nur Shahida. So this is clause 1.1H. In this clause, it states that nominated subcontractor and nominated supplier are specialists in the installation of plumbing work, electrical work, mechanical work, and others. All these work are covered under PC sum in the BQ, and those work also covered under provisional sums as instructed by the SO. Other than that, SO upon the NSC to execute the works and services which form part of the main contract. Next, SO doesn't have power to instruct the NSC toward original works that are priced by the contractor, but SO have power to give instruction to NSC to carry out works that doesn't include in the original contract, such as additional works. Last but not least, NSC and nominated supplier are similarly treated. Only the roles are different, which is the NSC do the work and nominated supplier supply material or goods.
The amount allowed for the prime cost sum does not include profit for the contractor and the cost for providing general attendance by the contractor for the nominated subcontractor's work. Profit and attendance are given separately in the PQ for the contractor to price accordingly. Stated in the clause 34.1 PWD Form 203A, the profit and attendance are given separately in the PQ. It is also not included in the prime cost sum. Therefore, the adjustment is done by omitting the original prime cost sum, profit and attendance from the contract, and then add the actual value of work that has been executed by the nominated subcontractor, and also the amount for profit and attendance.
In PWD 203A, clause 1.1L, it mentioned about provisional sums. Provisional sums applies to work or goods that cannot be measured while preparing the BQ due to a lack of drawings, specifications, or other documentation. The approximate cost of the works or materials are calculated using the most up-to-date information available at the time and are included in the tender document. Example for provisional sums is hot water installation system.
As for provisional sum, according to the clause, the SO must issue the instructions for the expenditure of the provisional sum in the contract. The clause also stated that to deduct the contractor's provisional sum and add the actual value of the contractor's work. So this is the example of calculation for the expenditure of provisional sum.
34.3. In this clause, it states that the SO can convert provisional sum item in the BQ to PC sum. If the object is transformed to a PC sum item, the following happens. With the consent of the SO, the work will be open to the NSC. Then with the consent of the SO, the contractor can tender for the work.
The amount allowed for prime sum item is the estimated amount of work to be executed. The attendance item is to be priced by the contractor and is normally given as a lump sum. The allowance for both profit and attendance are the amount to be paid to the contractor, since the prime cost sum is exclusive of main contractor's profit and cost of attendance for the nominated subcontractor's work. As stated in the PW Form 203A Clause 34.4, a contractor may tender for the work covered by the PC sum if he is capable to carry out the work to be decided by the SO. He elects to tender for the work. He is allowed to do so by the SO, and the work is stated in the appendix of the condition of contract. If the tender of the contractor is accepted, the tender is considered as exclusive of profit and attendance. The contractor is not entitled to the profit and attendance charges anymore.
Okay, so next we move on to the subcontractor and limited supplier for PWD 03A. And for supplying materials and goods only. So in this case, the PC sum item for supplying only the materials or goods by an NS may be shown in the BQ as in table below. So PC sum item for supply of iron manganese. So in the table here shows how the item will be placed in the BQ. Okay. So in this case, where the materials or goods which are supplied by the nominated supplier will be fixed by the contractor, and besides, the amount allowed for PC sum item is the estimated amount of goods supplied, and the amount will be then extended as required. However, if the actual amount is extended is less than the amount allowed for the item, then the difference will be omitted from the contract and then considered as saving for the client. So in this case, the allowance for profit is the amount of paid to the contractor, since the PC sum is exclusive of main contractor's profit. So this profit item is to be priced by the contractor, and it is normally given as percentage of value of goods supplied by the nominated suppliers, and the work fixed only is stated in the heading for the works in the BQ, where the contractor has to fix only the materials and goods supplied by the nominated suppliers, and fixed only materials will only include the taking delivery of the goods, unloading, getting in, stored, as well as protecting from store and also placing in position, including all hoisting required, and also assembling and fixing.
Next, in clause 60.1, nomination of subcontractor or nominated supplier. The SO is in charge of securing a subcontractor for the work, which is usually done through a quotation or tendering process. The contractor must sign a contract with the nominated subcontractor. Then, the contractor must receive SO's instruction to this effect. SO must not postpone the nomination of the nominated subcontractor because this will slow down the overall progress of the project and cost the contractor capital. In this case, the contractor may claim for the extension of time and loss and expense due to the SO's delay in nominating the contractor.
So this is nomination of NSC and NS for objections. The clause stated is 60.3 on PWD. Okay, as stated in the clause, the contractor has the right to refuse the SO nomination. Therefore, the SO cannot appoint a subcontractor in certain cases, such as if the contractor makes reasonable objections against his nomination, the contractor must file a written objection to the proposed nominated subcontractor within 21 days of the SO, instructing the contractor to enter into a subcontract with the proposed NSC. The following are some examples of fair objections ground and the timeline of the objection to nomination by contractor. The first one is previous unsatisfactory dealing with the person, technical incompetence of the person, and financial instability of the person. This is the timeline of objection nomination by the contractor. Next cases, if the proposed subcontractor refused to consider the subcontract terms and conditions, and the following are some examples regarding these cases. Next, if the proposed subcontractor refused to accept the subcontract terms and conditions. These are some examples. And lastly, if the contractor's objection is not approved by the SO, he must enter into a subcontractor agreement or pursue the issue to arbitration.
Clause 60.3. In this clause, it states that the contractor is not required to enter into a subcontract with the NSC or nominated supplier. But the first one, the SO might appoint a subcontractor. The second one, arrange for the contractor to complete the work himself. The third one, change the PC sum works, including, if possible, omitting the item and having it completed by others either simultaneously or at a later time.
Okay, so let's proceed to the next part of our presentation for today on subcon and nominated supplier for payment to the subcon. So based on clause 61.1, it explains that the payment said that the SO issue must also state the amount of payment made to the various subcons. So the government have the right to make the direct payments to the subcons, okay? And the general prelim available to the nominated subcon as well as prelim to be given by the subcon must always be stated by the main con. And so the interim SID will have stated the amount due to contractor and also subcon separately. And the payments due to the subcon or suppliers are shown in the attachment to the SID. Okay, so for 61.1 explains that all payments due to nominated subcon are paid directly to each of by the employer. So in this case, the fees for the nominated subcon are not usually made the contractor, thus avoiding the problem of non-payment of subcon. Okay, so moreover, all payments made will be directed to the subcon as contract considered as payment to the contractor. Okay, so here's the flow chart for payment to the subcon.
Payment to NSC. According to PWD Form 203A Clause 60.2, the government have the right to make the deduction from the amount due to the subcontractor even though there is no contractual relationship between two parties. The deduction is for the payment to the contractor in the following circumstances. To compensate the contractor for any deduction on his payment made by the government due to the subcontractor's fault. This may happen in case where the government have wrongly deducted monies due to the contractor for fault of the subcontractor. Any amount as agreed by the subcontractor or amount awarded in arbitration or by court. Any amount for claim for loss and expenses due to subcontractor's fault.
According to clause 62 in PWD 203A, the government is not liable to nominated subcontractor or nominated supplier regarding clause 60 and clause 61. Now, in clause 63.1, responsibilities of contractor to nominated subcontractor. The contractor must ensure that the nominated subcontractor completed all work in accordance with the contract. Despite the fact that the government selects the subcontractors, it cannot be held liable for the subcontractors' failures as mentioned before.
Next is responsibilities of contractor to nominated subcontractor. This is the clauses stated in PWD. The clauses are 63.2. As mentioned in clause, the contractor has two options if the subcontractor abandons the subcontract or if the subcontractor's employment is determined. The two options are hire another subcontractor to finish the work or complete the work on his own. In this case, the contractor will be paid by the original tender amount for the work. Any demand for extra costs incurred as a result of a subcontractor's decision will be denied. Since there is a significant financial risk involved, the contractor must proceed with caution when approving the subcontractor's nomination. The subcontractor must be capable and the tender amount must be fair.
Okay, next is other matters for delay or ALT. The nominated subcontractor is to give notice of any case of delay to the contractor who pass them on the SO if the delay are not due to the negligence or default of the nominated subcontractor. The contractor with the written consent of SO is to give a fair and reasonable extension of time to the nominated subcontractor if the ground of time extension are not accepted by the attendant officer, he has to pay the LLD to the contractor. Contractor can be granted extension of time for delay caused by the nominated subcontractor.
Okay, so let's move on to the next part for this presentation, which on subcontractor and nominated supplier for other matters. Okay, so other matters include extension of time and also determination. Okay, so in the case of delay in AOT, nominated subcon provides notice to the cause of delay to the contractor who passed them to the SO. However, if the delay is not due to negligence or defaults of the nominated subcon, then the contractor with the SO consent give a fair and reasonable AOT to the nominated subcon. Okay, so on contrary, if the SO does not accept the grounds for the EOT, he must pay for AAD. Okay, so the contractor can also be granted for EOT for delay caused by the NS. Okay, so for determination part, okay, so in this case, the employment of the nominated subcon is automatically determined if the contractor's engagement is determined. However, the nominated subcon is also not entitled to claim against the employer that arises from such determination, and furthermore, the nominated subcon has no right to determine his employment.
Next, in PAM 2018, clause 27.1, it is regarding prime cost sums and provisional sums. The contractor will hire the nominated subcontractor to carry out the related work as part of the project, subject to certain rights of objection. The work is typically designated as prime cost work, which is defined as a stated amount to which the contractor can add his profit margin and attendant costs. The contractor pays attendance, which entitles the nominated subcontractor to use general site facilities while still holding him liable for any misuse or damage incurred by his employees. Then, the design is the responsibility of the nominated subcontractor rather than the contractor. The nominated subcontractor is in charge of functionality that is fit for purpose. The architect must ensure that the employer and nominated subcontractor have a suitable warranty in place to deal with any design flaws. Next, in clause 27.2, nomination of subcontractor. In this form, the contract administrator must not accept any subcontractor that refuses to accept any terms and conditions of the subcontract, which include in clause 27.2a, carry out the works to the reasonable satisfaction of the contractor and the contract administrator, comply with all the provisions of the main contract, indemnify the contractor against the same liabilities under the subcontract as to those for which the main contractor indemnifies the employer under the main contract. The subcontractor must complete the work within time, and if he fails to do so, he is liable to the contractor for lost or liquidated damages. Next, in clause 27.2e, the nominated subcontractor can receive an extension of time against the main contractor if the contractor's default or related incident disrupts the progress of completion of the nominated subcontractor's work. Before issuing an extension, the contractor must obtain the contract administrator's recommendation or consent. Next, in 27.2f, when the contractor and the nominated subcontractor agree that the subcontract has been completed practically, they may ask the contract administrator to issue a certificate to that effect. The contract administrator will grant a such certificate if he considers the subcontract work has reached practical completion. Next, in clause 27.2g, the contractor will issue a certificate of non-completion if the nominated subcontractor fails to complete the subcontract within time. The nominated subcontractor is responsible for loss and expenses as well as an agreed upon liquidated damages amount. Then, in clause 27.2h, the amounts included for each nominated subcontractor will be shown on payment certificates to the contractor. The amounts are notified to the nominated subcontractors, and the contractor is required to pay within the time frame. The contractor must pay to the NSCs within 7 days after the period of honouring certificate. Next, in clause 27.3, objection to nomination of subcontractor. If the contractor has fair grounds to refuse the nomination, he he may do so. He can address these rational objections by notifying the contract administrators in written form not more than 14 days after receipt of nomination instruction from the architect. Example for the ground to refuse the nomination is nominated subcontractor's financial instability or solvency, non-technical incompetence, and nominated subcontractor declines to provide him appropriate indemnity. Next, in clause 27.4 is the action following objection of nominated subcontractor. The architect may issue instructions to eliminate the objection so that the contractor may enter into the subcontract, or the architect may cancel the nomination and omit the work, or the architect may nominate a different subcontractor to enter the subcontract.
Next, we move on to clause 27.5. As stated in this section of the clause, the interim payment indicates the sum due to the various nominated subcontractors. In each payment certificate, each subcontractor will be notified of the sum owed to him. As mentioned in this part of the clause, all NSC payment must be made to the contractor. During the period of honouring certificate, the contractor should be compensated by the employer. If the employer fails to pay the contractor within the period of honouring certificate, this will become the breach of contract. Next, if the contractor does not obtain reimbursement for the employer, he is still liable for paying his subcontractors within 7 days after the period of honouring certificates expired. This is the timelines of payment to subcontractors. Next is clause 27.6, failure of contractor to pay nominated subcontractor. As mentioned in this part of the clause, the architect must ensure that the contractor has paid all the subcontractors before issuing a new interim certificate. The required evidence must be given to the architect within 14 days after the request has been made by him. This is the timeline of furnishing of proof of previous payment to NNC by the contractor. Also in these clauses, it stated that in the event that the contractor fails to pay the subcontractors, the employer will make a direct payment to them after 14 days if the contractor has not provided the architect with the requisite evidence. The following request can be made, which is the architect has the option of issuing a new certificate to pay the subcontractor, but he is not obligated to. And next, the architect has the option of issuing the certificate at any time. For example, whether or not the certificate is liable for issuing according to the monthly claim interval. Lastly, in this clause, 27.3 also mentioned that when the architect issues the certificate, the employer is responsible for making the payment. The payment to the nominated subcontractor can be made directly by the employer. This is not a requirement of the employer. He is in a position to pay the contractor. Since he is not a party to the main contractor, nominated subcontractor has no right to enforce the direct payment. Therefore, in each interim payment, the cumulative sum for the direct payment to the nominated subcontractor is limited to the amount otherwise owed to the contractor. So if the employee has paid directly to the contractor, the architect must deduct the amount of their fault from the amount specified as required in the certificates. Next is final payment to nominated subcontractor, as stated in clause 27.7. As mentioned in the clause, if any NSC has adequately indemnified the contractor against any latent defects in the subcontract works, the architect can secure early final payment from the NSC. The architect may provide the NSC final amount in an interim certificate, and the contractor must pay the NSC the amount certified by the architect. Any retention associated with the subcontract works will be included in the amount certified, and the limit of retention fund will be reduced proportionately. Next is determination of the nominated subcontractor's employment in clause 27.8. As stated in the clause, the contractor cannot decide the employment of any nominated subcontractors without the written consent from the architect. If the contractor still wishes to decide the employment of the NSC, the contractor must submit a written report including all of NSC default and make a copy to be sent to the NSC as well. The Before deciding whether or not to give his written report consent, the architect can suggest that the nominated subcontractors respond to the contractor report first. If the contractors also they stated that if the contractor employment under the main contract is terminated for any excuse, the NSC employment under the subcontract will also be terminated as well. Next is contractors' responsibilities for nominated subcontractors. As stated in clause 27.9, in most cases, the contractor is responsible to the employer for any subcontractor's inability to fulfill the main contract work. However, depending on the circumstances surrounding the nomination of subcontract and the term of the main contract, the contractor may not be entirely responsible for the NSC default. Therefore, mentioned in the clause, the contractor is responsible for ensuring that the nominated subcontractor perform the subcontract work in compliance with the subcontractor by providing designs, materials, goods, and workmanship as described and to the appropriate satisfaction of the architect.
Clause 27.10. Employer no privity of contract with NSC means there are no secret between employers and NSC about the contract. Clause 27.11. If the contractor lawfully terminated the NSC employment with the written consent of the architect must re-nominate a substitute. The contractor are entitled to EOT but not to any burden such as damages, loss and expense. Clause 27.12. If the NSC validly terminates his own employment due to defaults of the contractor, the architect must re-nominate a substitute, which is same as clause 27.11. And the contractor is paid the same sum as the original subcontract. The contractor will pay the substitute any additional cost to complete the subcontract works and to pay the employer the cost of renomination, the cost of loss and expense as a result of termination. And lastly, the contractor is not entitled to any EOT unless and until the contractor has established the termination by the NSC is invalid. Clause 27.13. If the architect already agrees about the nominated subcontractor, the NSC should pay all the expenses to the contractor, or not, the contractor can get the sum from the NSC for performance point. Clause 27.14. The works stated in the tender by the contractor will be considered as variation, and the contractor is not entitled to profit and attendance, which the price is not included in final account.
Okay, so for PAM 2018 on nominated supplier, so in the case for nominated supplier in clause 28.1 explains that the nominated supplier shall have provision of PC sum and provisional sum in the contract bills, and the nominated supplier shall be nominated by the architect. Okay, so this allows the client to have a direct separate negotiation with the supplier. Okay, so for this clause explains that the nominated supplier will not be part of the contract if the contractor objects the nomination, and the objection may be due to several reasons. And the objection must be made within less than 24 days from receipt of nomination instruction from architect, and the supplier who does not nominate by the architect will not be part of the contract. Okay, so for 28.2 explains on that the nominated supplier must supply the materials and goods supplied in good quality and standards specified, and it must also satisfy the architect himself. So in clause 28.2 explains that NS will only make good materials that is on site within the period of making the defects. And if the materials are defective before it has arrived on site, hence it was part of the contractor's fault, and therefore the nominated supplier will not make good the defects. And next, for B2, the defects occur due to his worker, materials, and goods supplied are properly stored and not misused by the contractor himself. Okay, so for 28.2c, okay, so in this case, the materials and goods are delivered according to the stipulated time, and for 28.2d, are the materials and goods belong to the contractor despite non-full payment is made. Okay, so for 28.2e, where the payment to the nominated supplier shall be made within 7 days after the period of honoring certificate. And last but not least, we have 28.3, where this clause explains that if the contractor has made a reasonable objection against his nomination, therefore, it must be due to previous unsatisfactory technical incompetence, financial instability, and the contractor cannot be responsible to perform works assigned to the nominated supplier. Okay, so for clause 28.4, I've explained that even the architect have the rights to object the nomination of an S by the contractor. Therefore, he may proceed with renomination, provide arrangement for the contractor to execute work where he may tender for the works under PC sum. And last but not least is by way of variation, omit the work altogether from contractor or omit and have the work executed by third party.
As stated in the PAM contract 2018 clause 28.5 until 28.8 nominated supply, the supply contract to provide material with the quality and the standard they are provided. Supplier to make any goods, any defect which appear within the LP, and to pay the contractor for any consequential expenses provided that they are not patient defect or due to defective workmanship or improper storage or neglect by the contractor. The ownership of the material shall be passed to the contractor on the delivery by the nominated supplier whether or not the payment has been paid fully. The payment value of materials and goods supplied by the nominated supplier is to be made within 7 days after the period of honoring the certificate. The amount is subject to retain by the contractor of an amount not exceeding 5% of nominated supplier's sum. The contractor holds the retention in trust for the nominated supplier. When the architect has certified the release of retention fund to the contractor must also release the nominated supplier retention within 7 days of period of honoring certificate.